Hi, my name is Michael Yammine. I'm the director of Reset, and this is the Fright Lab.
Welcome to the Fright Lab. I'm Lucas Yoakum. Manning the ones and twos tonight, as always, is the one and only Joseph Wren. And we have a very special guest with us tonight. If you just heard the intro bumper to the show, you already know. With us tonight on the phone is the one and only Michael Yammine, director of Reset. Michael, welcome to the Fright Lab, and thank you for showing up.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so a little background for those of you who may not have heard the opening, the live reaction that we kind of did to the show that we recorded. The movie Reset, sci-fi horror, set in middle of nowhere, rural America. There's a man, and he's going through some shit, you might say.
He's got a gun, and the creatures are very moist.
The creatures are very wet. So, the movie, again, it's sci-fi horror set in rural America. You've got a man on a farm with a gun and a big problem. But it's way more than that. It's
no chainsaw for a hand yet, right?
No.
Just checking for a friend.
Just checking. But it's one of those deep, dark mystery kind of movies. It kind of grabs you and says, welcome to Silent Hill by way of Jacob's Ladder. And now
you told me I wasn't allowed to bring up Jacob's Ladder.
I never said no. I never said we wouldn't bring up Jacob's Ladder. I said you couldn't bring up Jacob's Ladder. I do. But I'm talking entirely too much. Let's get out the gate with our guest. So the obvious question is, what was going through your head, man? This is a dark subject matter. A man isolated and damaged. Where's the genesis of Reset?
Well, a lot of us spend a lot of time holding on to the past, and it's a bit self-inflicted suffering through trauma or loss. I lost a lot of friends through suicide or bizarre instances, and so a lot of that core idea of letting go revolves around that. So it's like a personal part of my life that's very human. That is the main throughway line of the film. So movies like Arrival, Signs, and The Fourth Kind were kind of my inspirations because I loved the messaging in Signs. I loved the time play with Arrival, and I loved the sort of horror version of the sci-fi when it came to The Fourth Kind. So I kind of borrowed elements from those movies.
Well, you know what they say, that, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And there is a level of that. And it's one, when I was joking earlier about Silent Hill and Jacob's Ladder, one that wasn't denigrating. I'm a big fan of both of those movies, but also that it is playing with and experimenting with some stuff that is both known and unknown. One of the things that really struck me about the main character, which I want to just say for the record, he's a bearded guy with a very particular haircut named Lucas. There is a resemblance there that is more than a little passing.
I was going to say, you must have loved his name.
It was a little weird, actually. But so right from the beginning of the film, you see some things about our main character. He's a guy who lives in kind of the middle of nowhere. You zoom in on his house, from it's either a crane or a drone shot, where you see that he's rural. He lives out in the country. There's a United States Marine Corps flag on his flagpole. And the first thing you see of him, other than that he's clearly had a rough night, is that he's got a hunting rifle with a camouflage strap that he's carrying it by. So we can draw a lot from this character right out the gate. I mean, like before a single line of dialogue, you already know some stuff about our protagonist. How much time did you spend, I guess, kind of living in the skin of this character? Did you really spend a lot of time fleshing him out, or was this stuff that kind of revealed itself as you were writing the script?
I mean, I knew from the get-go that this character, he had to have some sort of military background. I mean, I wrote the entire film around my uncle's property. That's where we were shooting.
Oh.
And so I had so much available to me. The barn, the 70 acres of land, his beautiful home. My uncle is actually ex-military himself, so that kind of helped with things of shaping the lore behind Lucas's character. And so as we moved on, there were choices that were made. I mean, the biggest thing I didn't want to do was try to convey him as some like Rambo character. This is
Right.
just a father. He's a skilled guy, but he's just your average guy. And he knows how to utilize his tools. And most of all, he's doing what any father would do. I feel like if their child was taken away.
We had a real hard time, as I think anybody would, trying to talk about a movie you just saw without just giving away all the spoilers. So one of the things we did on our brief recap was look at the trailer, and then how do we talk about the movie based on what you want the audience to know from the trailer? Because that's what I'm allowed to share with someone who hasn't seen the movie that doesn't just give it all away. Clearly, this person is going through something. And I think the line that repeats throughout the trailer and even throughout the beginning and middle of the film is his child is missing and he's trying to get her back. And when you see that in the trailer and there's a monster, it's coming, then you see the opening of the film and he's clearly had a bad evening. The driving home that occurs where he's just trying to stay awake. The thing that stood out to me, and we were taking bets, I don't want to say it just yet, we were taking bets on what some characters were going to be throughout the film, but it stood out to me that whatever's going on, everybody seems to be aware of it, but nobody's calling him on it. He walks into the diner. He's clearly, he's sleep deprived. He's tore up. He's bruised up. I had to ask myself, whatever is really going on this farm, I think everybody in the community is aware of it, but no one's called the cops. No one has, done a wellness check on this man. So either he's the crazy guy in town or everybody's in on it. It gave me a Twilight Zone vibe that I would not let go of the entire time. So I think my question is, when you're trying to build a real thing that is occurring and mix it with something surreal, like that Rod Serling mindfuck, I'm going to say that. How do you decide what to say and what not to say? Because you don't explain everything by the end of the film. There's a couple things out there that, I have questions about 3 to 6 months from now, but the things that you do explain, how do you make that decision from a story perspective, from a writer perspective, or from a director perspective? Because you could just tie up all the loose ends by the end. You tie up the important ones, but there's some that are kind of left out there. How do you make that decision when you're putting this film together?
I mean, as somebody who is a connoisseur of films, I don't like being spoon-fed everything. And to me, I don't want the director to hold my hand. I want to do some thinking. So there was a level of abstract concepts in there that I wanted to leave for the audience to kind of sort of decide on their own. Because the big question is always, I personally love drawing parallels between religion and science fiction. And depending on what your beliefs are as a viewer, if you lean more to the religious side of things, you might see it all as part of a biblical aspect, right? But then if you're somebody who's more into science fiction, you might lean more into that. And either way, it's not going to ruin the experience for you. So we all wonder if it's a reality that these parallels are all the same. If it's all the same thing, do we all wonder the same thing? Are angels, aliens actually coming from the sky, or whatever the big question is? I can't answer that for anybody because I don't have the answer to that too. That's all part of the unknown. But when I was writing the film, my main goal was to drive it home as far as letting go. Everybody sort of, the way people handle things, they might take the easy way out, like Evie did, sadly, or they might do the smart move like Arthur did one day and walked away from it all, or you can be Lucas and be obsessed and, you know, constantly snowball yourself into your own little apocalypse. So, as far as the abstract things that I left in there, it was purposeful because I wanted people to talk about it. I wanted them to sort of come up with their own assessments as far as that goes.
The word I kept coming back to as I was watching the movie was ecumenical. Like, you could very much read the movie as a Christian allegory. You know, are they angels? Is he? Joe asked the question as we were watching it. Is this a Catholic purgatory thing that he is waiting to prove that, okay, I'm actually ready for salvation, I should be let out of here? Or like, I also read it, man, this is just me. I read it as a Zen Buddhist allegory about if you are not willing to let go, you will be continually dragged down. Like, it felt very Tibetan Buddhist also, but there's also like it was Carl Jung who said, let go or be dragged. You know, there is a very Jungian kind of thing. I like that because it doesn't pin the movie down. Like, there's something about, you know, we were joking at one point as we were watching the film that, oh, there's something kind of Lynchian about this. There's something very, very open to interpretation. And if you were to come out and say, no, this is clearly a Catholic allegory, I think the movie falls apart. And I mean, yeah, obviously when you watch the movie, you'll be very clear that it's not, but you'll have that moment of going, oh, well, no, what was he trying to say? It seems like getting into the headspace of the film has more to do with, you used the word obsession, also getting into this space of like self-torment. I don't know I don't know a single word for that, but this kind of self-inflicted torture that he's putting himself through.
We call it depression, Lucas.
Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. We can call it depression. But also, you make the point that, you know, the character of Arthur says, like, yeah, at one point I just realized that this is fucked and I'm just going to walk away. Spoiler alert, by the way, but not really, because here again, how the hell do you spoil this movie? I don't know. It's you at the beginning of our call, you made this point about you're very versed in loss and in having to deal with the decisions people make. And very obviously, I'm not going to be the guy who's like, tell me about the time you lost a friend and how that, no, I'm not going to do that to you. But I am interested in this. You know, is this as much a personal diagnosis as it is a cultural thing? Like, I hate being the guy who asks the artist, what does it all mean? But I do think it's actually kind of an interesting question is, what is our art saying about the world we inhabit? I mean, do you find yourself like, I don't know, connecting or resonating more with Lucas or more with Arthur, or for that matter, more with Evie? Like, do you find that there's a part of you that is a big part of this character?
Yeah, there's, I mean, it's certainly a love letter to my own traumas, and it's a love letter to my own experiences. And, you know, for instance, the sort of clone scene there was an actual nightmare I had, and it messed with me the next day when I woke up. And I was like, that felt so real. I feel like reality is kind of screwed up for me right now, you know? So, the takeaway for me when I thought about it was like, oh, am I getting in my own way sometimes because I am sort of living in the past for specific things and I keep revisiting it, and, you know, suffering is a choice. So exploring that sort of human side of things, you can ground the film so that you can play with these sort of like grandiose ideas and these abstract ideas, but still keep the film anchored where, you know, somebody isn't going to be completely lost by the end of it. You can at least understand letting go by the end, and the rest is really just up to you. So as far as the letting go aspect, that was such a big part of it for me when I wrote it, because if you noticed in the credits, I did dedicate the film to two of my friends, one who sadly passed away unexpectedly, and one who sadly took his own life. And so, you know, I'm shining some light on that without getting into what do you call it?
Without making it a confessional.
Yes. There's aspects of this film that certainly are pieces of me, but and of course, a lot of it's on my own interests. You know, the idea of religious parallels between science fiction. You know, I study a lot of that stuff on my own time, and I could find myself obsessed with the topics and find ways to, unify them in some sort of fashion.
If you were to point to a sci-fi either author or creator, it could be books, could be television shows or whatever, like what would you say your big points of reference were?
Oh man, that's I've read a lot of books from like Eric Van Daniken,
Chariot of the Gods, yeah.
Chariots of the Gods and Book of Enoch, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen some of the shows of what is it, Ancient Aliens and stuff.
Sure.
That stuff's interesting. I mean, I feel like they're more obviously just observations rather than anything else. But all of those things very much interest me. I mean, one of the things I loved about Arrival was that it was a very human story, despite these like octopods that showed up, and you got this grand scheme of a weapon and language being a weapon. But I love the way Denis Villeneuve like approached the time aspect of it. Seeing into the future or looking into the past. So that's where I drew a lot of inspiration as well, because those are topics I love reading about and talking about and thinking about.
It's interesting how we all approach the unknown in different ways. And a film like this vividly touched on what I now understand to be anxiety, panic, grief. Never have I had those issues in my life until a few years ago. And I wish that someone had sat me down and told me about them. If somebody had explained to me, like, if this ever happens to you, I'm not going to do it now, but if somebody wants to hear it, I'm happy to elaborate. If somebody sat me down and said, if this ever happens to you, if this feeling, if these symptoms ever occur, like that is panic, that is anxiety, and this is how you deal with that situation, I would have felt more prepared. But now I look back on it and I think I survived it. It's okay. And a film like this, when we talk about the unknown, I think the unknown for me has been the number one biggest antagonizer of that panic, of that anxiety. When you are telling a story that talks about quitting the actual problem instead of just quitting, that is really hard to convey. And things like, Arrival, talking about, we have those conversations in our head. I think we spend a lot of time on the past thinking about the future, but it gets turned into a dwelling really quickly. And I wonder sometimes why that is. Is it just because we're left to our own devices, or is it because, like you mentioned, unfortunately, there's loss, and it feels like everybody has that loss in their lives at some point. Do you feel like that is a symptom of, to me, it feels like I'm the only one left to think about it, and I don't have anybody else to bounce that idea off of. Does that kind of land the same way when you think about some of these themes in the movie? Or is it something else where, I mean, I don't want to just say, is it because nobody taught us coping skills before we had these problems? But I'm thinking that right now.
I think it's, you could be well versed in coping skills, but at the end of the day, it's like, put yourself in Lucas's shoes for a minute. How can
Can I have your shoes?
Yeah.
That was a really bad joke, Joe. Jeez. Good God, man. Anyway, let's let the director talk.
I mean, imagine trying to get somebody to relate to that pain you're going through, and that's how you feel. It's like it's almost like you're describing, like you're fighting demons and aliens, and or these otherworldly forces. Because most of the time when you talk to somebody, all they can say is, "What? Keep your head up." They kumbaya it, and it's not enough, right? And then you're like, "Oh, nobody can relate to me. They don't understand the sort of psychological journey you've been on." And so when they chalk it up to just this brief little summary, that feels like their magic pill, and you're like, it's just not that simple. So yeah, there is a language barrier there to some degree. that whatever you're going through is going to feel that fantastical, because your hardest day was your hardest day, even by comparison to me, where I could say this day was my hardest day, right? But it doesn't matter because your day was your hardest day, So trying to get somebody to understand that it's challenging, All they could say is, hey, fuck up, bud. Keep moving forward. And you're like, oh, thanks. That's it. That's all it took. I didn't realize that. Jeez, let me put the gun down.
It reminds me of a story that my brother once said. You get that. Sometimes we get stuck in one-upsmanship, and even if you don't mean to, occasionally somebody says, I'm having a bad day, and then somebody else says, yeah, well, I'm having an even worse day, and it's not about the competition. And I
No.
like how you actually touch on that a few times in the film, and then other times it's no, you don't understand. The creature from the Black Lagoon is in my field right now. And sometimes that's how it feels. And I like how you use the literal to explain the not literal, the mental.
The literal to explain the metaphorical.
Yes.
Mhm.
I knew this therapist years ago. For before anybody makes the joke who's listening to the show, you mean your therapist, Lucas? No, they weren't my therapist. They were just a therapist I knew. I knew this therapist years ago who made this comment once. They were talking about a client of theirs, and they were going through this just absolutely mind-meltingly bad situation. And I said, how do you, as a therapist, you've been through some stuff. You're a living human being. You've been through some. How do you relate to that? Because you can't relate to this person's absolutely wild experiences. She kind of shrugged and said, you have to remember that crisis is relative. That, as you pointed out, the worst day you've ever had in your entire life is sometimes the easiest day another person has ever gone through.
Mhm.
And there's a certain level of, our protagonist, Lucas, is in a diner. I want to talk to you about that diner here in a little bit, but we don't want to fall off on that too hard. You have these kind of asshole townies who are just absolutely grilling him and saying oh, well, maybe we should go dig on your farm and find out what really happened there. And he's like, no, really, come and see. You want to see the mystery? Come and see the mystery.
Mhm.
It's very interesting. You were bringing up Villeneuve's Arrival, and there's a point that's made in that movie about the group that you're following is communicating with the aliens through kind of word association, trying to find their principles and how it meets language. Whereas the other, they talk about the Chinese government's group is using mahjong tiles as a way of communicating with, and it's creating two different kind of ideological frameworks. That's kind of the big problem here. Again, if the hardest day you've ever had may not be the hardest day someone else has had, do you think that there's we're just relating to each other across universals, loss, happiness, wonder, fear, the kind of universal emotions? Are we able to communicate across that? Or do you think that the kind of ideological frameworks we're operating from end up being the thing that hinder us?
I mean, the craziest thing is emotion can be such a weapon, but it could also be such a solution, to a lot of problems. Whether you have compassion or love for somebody, or if you have anger, that becomes a weapon, and to some degree. And I think that's obviously what makes us so unique as a species, is that our emotions are so bizarre. I feel like, if some intelligent beings came in, do they even understand what emotion is? I mean, that was kind of the whole point there with the reveal. It's yo, your human that emotion was able to transcend our ability to do this and that, without revealing too much. But it's, I think ideology, that's such a nuanced question too, because it's ideology can be good and it can be bad, right? So, I mean, if we didn't have ideology, I don't think there would be restrictions on how chaotic emotion could get. Where your impulses are sort of your main driving force, and those could be very bad impulses, right? And if it wasn't for certain ideologies, there would be absolute chaos in the world. So it's a tricky it's a tricky topic.
Which and it kind of brings me to another question I want to ask is, So using our protagonist Lucas, I'm trying to get my head around, because I've never directed a film. You have 100% more directing experience than I do at this point. But what I'm trying to get my head around is, how do you take an actor, or for that matter, anybody, and say, okay, you have lost your daughter to deeply mysterious and highly disturbing circumstances. You've been isolated on a farm for an indeterminate length of time. Go. How do you prepare an actor to get into that extreme and that nebulous or mysterious of a headspace?
When I was writing the film, I was speaking a lot with Adam Hawley, the lead, who did a fantastic job.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely.
He's a father already, so that was already part of the toolkit that was accessible, and a lot of it was just me trusting what I knew he was able to bring, because I knew he was such a versatile actor, and setting up that world for him and saying, "Hey, man, these are the stakes, and this is the emotion I'm looking for. Go." There was no hiccup, and I think a lot of it has to do with his experience as an actor and his own personal experiences as a father. So it wasn't that challenging. I think what was more challenging was dealing with the cold. The weather, I think, helped put people in a really morbid state, so it definitely helped him get to where he needed to go.
Where was this movie filmed, by the way?
It was in Endicott, New York, upstate.
Oh,
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way you have it filmed, I was thinking like Montana, Utah, but at Endicott. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about frigid freaking cold. Yeah, that'll do it.
Oh, it gets cold out here. Yeah. It was important for me to just, I didn't want to say what the town name is. I felt like all of that was irrelevant. I don't think it adds anything. And most alien concepts will happen with like places near Area 51, whatever. I wasn't interested in exploring that. I don't think that was important, So I kept that very, very vague. The diner we actually shot about an hour away. It was in New Berlin, New York.
Okay, so
it was like the perfect little diner.
That was T's Diner, right? Because I think you shouted them out in the credits. Okay, so what I'm getting from you at the moment is that you didn't have to do any set dressing, and it literally is just a diner in the middle of nowhere, New Berlin, New York.
Yes, it was the exact look I was going for, and to me, diners are timeless. I don't care what year it is. Find me a diner, right? And
absolutely,
especially those like vintage diners, I'm all about it. So it does play a sort of symbolic role in the story, And it, funny enough, the diner was called T's Diner, and I looked at diners as a timeless place. So that kind of worked well with what I was going for.
How is the food?
Oh, it's amazing. It's really good. Look, I know anybody could just make eggs and toast, but I think there's a certain quality of love there that's infused with the food, because it was a fantastic breakfast.
It's called butter, Michael.
Yeah,
it's a lot of butter, and you know what? We love it. I think those types of places are, at least in the Midwest where we're located or outside of St. Louis, they're starting to become less frequent.
Yes.
And sometimes that's what you want when it's dark and cold at the end of the day. And unfortunately, you have to wait for the morning for that sort of thing to pop up. But, I liked how it felt like a stereotype, but again, intentional. It actually led me to feel more claustrophobic and initially draw that line of comparison between, okay, I don't know yet what's going on in the first 10 minutes of the movie, but I'm starting to get that Twilight Zone vibe. I'm starting to get that very claustrophobic vibe. You went out of your way not to say the town and just focus on the setting. Let the setting tell the story is a better way to say that. But it gave me vibes of, I've heard stories about Alaska towns because they're so remote, kind of feeling like grown up high school. And even though this guy's been having clearly a bad day, it feels like everybody at this diner knows each other, whether or not they want to. And that to me is one of the best ways to make something feel isolated and claustrophobic is you take away the external stimuli. And yeah, there's one place to go. Like whatever he's been going through, he changes his clothes, he gets in the truck and he drives to get some breakfast because everybody kind of knows what's going on. And it's just enough, exposition from, I'm going to say the douchebags in the corner, to make you feel kind of that pressure that's going on. And I think that pressure is what helps tell the story for me. And I think a diner, like you said, is timeless because a diner is you and the three guys sitting next to you, if you're lucky. And it's always going to be those guys.
And if you notice where his placement, where he's sitting, visually, he's cornered. He's sitting in the corner there. And yeah, there's a lot of, there was so much charm in that diner. I loved it. I mean, there was a couple things placed there. I mean, you saw the little kid drawings next to the register. I mean, that's the thing about this film is if you pay attention hard enough, you're going to see imagery there that might foreshadow as well. So the two little girls that are drawn on that little picture before we see Ruth, you find something out later, obviously. That kind of, if you think back, you're like, oh man, that was almost a little Easter egg of what's coming later, So there's just so much that I'm proud that's in there that I'm like, hey, this isn't a one-time watch. You have to go and watch it a few times and you start picking up on things you missed before. And it becomes a more interesting experience, I think.
Kudos to you for the runtime of this movie. I think another filmmaker would have spent more time on exposition and dialogue that you didn't need. And you said it at the very beginning of our conversation. I like movies where they don't hold my hand. And thank you for not holding my hand and in the best way possible, getting to the point. Because now all I have is questions and I want to go back and watch it again because still there's still two really big points at the end of the movie. I think to myself, if those were explained, I missed it. And if they're not explained, I'm annoyed and I like it because like grief, like those terrible things that happen, those bad days, it's not always about explaining it. Not everything gets an explanation. The point is get you to the finish line.
So I want to kind of dial back for a second and think about this from a kind of more of maybe a production standpoint. Is that this is almost a microcast. Like you have the on-screen actors, you have your creature performers, your men in the rubber suit, as it were. You have your cast out or your crew, obviously, in the wings, making sure the movie actually gets filmed and sound and light is done the way it should be done. But one of the things about this movie that I thought was kind of shocking was that the special effects are remarkably crisp. They're very clean. They look good. There's a certain over reliance on CG that you clearly didn't fall onto. We've already commented on the moisture content of our creature design. I think maybe I should talk to my doctor about this. But anyway, jokes aside, like, how do you manage to pull that off? Taking what's clearly an indie production that you had to you had to extract a maximum value, a maximum profit into every little thing. Do you think it's easier or harder now because of modern technology, modern filmmaking? What is the secret to making something that looks good on the cheap?
If you look at movies today, I mean, how many films have like a $200-300 million budget and the CGI is atrocious or the look is just not, you're like, really, this is it? This is what you did with all that money? And then the film falls short. I think the biggest problem with the industry today is they're not cutting back on budgets so that filmmakers and crew members can get more innovative. And I love working with restrictions because that allows me to MacGyver new ways to make things happen. So, things like the VFX we did, I wanted to make sure we could do as much as possible in camera, that when we do VFX, you're just peppering in and enhancing a bit, and that's it. So, I think the biggest challenge for me wasn't so much about making it look good, because I've been shooting commercials for TV and stuff for like 13, 14 years now. That's my main gig. And the biggest challenge for me was having all the right help. I was very skeleton crew, and I wore a lot of hats. And I think I don't think at one point I was actually running sound while I was shooting and directing, and I looked pretty silly. We laugh about it still. I had the headphones with the sound pack, and I had everybody mic'd up. And you just got to do what you got to do to get it done, and you can't fall apart and say, "Well, we got to scrap the shoot today because somebody didn't show up." You just gotta get in there and get it done. So, yeah, the challenge for me was making sure I had enough hands on deck. It wasn't so much about because I knew how I wanted the film to look. When I lit that barn, I lit it in a 360 way, so that when I'm shooting, I don't have to worry so much about moving lights or setting up a new shot. I could just move. The challenges were more in the nighttime shoots, because I wanted to use a lot of low lighting schemes without compromising the look with day for night or over lighting and bringing things down in post. I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff because it's so noticeable. And, unless you have a big budget, like something from Nosferatu, where they really develop this new color, that's an emulation of Tim Burton's Batman Returns. That color scheme worked beautifully for night stuff. But I didn't have that technology, and I didn't have that crew, and I certainly didn't have that budget. So, yeah, you got to figure out where your sacrifices are going to be. And one of them certainly wasn't production value. I did not want to give up on a day or waste any time just because somebody didn't show up. You just put your big boy pants on and you truck it. That's it. That's all you can do.
So that kind of brings me to like two kind of related questions. So the first one being, you were talking about how your work prior to making this film and some other, I know we of course looked at your IMDb before we got started. This is, you really are kind of at the beginning of your independently creative career, we'll say. Mm-hmm. How much does your experience in the commercial world, how much is that helping you, do you think? Like, you've directed 100% more commercials than I have at this point. So how much of it is that world actually feeding in and helping your now cinematic work?
Honestly, all of it. When I shoot commercials, I'm solo completely. I run sound, I do the lighting, I shoot, I write the scripts, or sometimes we don't have a script and I got to make something out of nothing, and and I edit everything. And, all of that has conditioned me to be in those sort of high intense situations where you're kind of running it solo and you're like, hey, I can make this happen. I'm comfortable here. I've been here. So that is like helped me develop my toolkit. And honestly, I wouldn't know what to do if I had a whole crew. Because I've had my finger on the button so for so long that it's like it would be so hard for me to give up the camera or give up, the sound. Well, maybe the sound. Running sound's a bit tedious, but everything else, I'm just so used to doing that. At the very least, I can communicate with these different departments properly, and they'll understand what I'm looking for. So it's certainly helped so much, honestly. So I'm grateful to have been in that position for so long.
Well, if you want somebody to run sound, you have my contact information now.
In the industry, we call that a shameless plug.
Thank you very much.
I kind of the next question I was thinking, because you brought up Nosferatu, Eggers Nosferatu, I assume is what you mean.
Yes.
It is such an interesting thing because on one hand, like, yeah, in order to make that movie work, they had to really dig into a lot of kind of early, kind of naive ideas about early filmmaking and really be willing to reinvent the wheel. Whereas, I don't know, I think you could look at a lot of modern films and say that it is very formulaic, and that formulaic is not necessarily a bad thing. There are some formulas that have stuck around because they work and they're good ideas. And there are some formulas that have stuck around because people want to make a quick buck and don't really care about creativity in some spaces. Not naming names, just saying. But, you know, if you had, for lack of a better term, if you had Nosferatu money, do you think, which, and for the record, like, Nosferatu is not even the most expensive movie that's come out the last 5 years. It's just a bigger budget than what many indie filmmakers are ever going to get access to, especially in their first 5 films. If you had Nosferatu money, do you think the movie would have come out substantially different? Or do you think you would have tried sticking to this, I don't know, lean and mean approach to filmmaking where you're sometimes wearing 3 sets of headphones and trying to not hold the boom mic yourself? Do you think that that it would have come out differently if you had, and I'm just making up a number, an additional $15 million in your budget? Do you think it'd be a substantially different film?
As far as the end result, no. I was very concise about what I wanted. I mean, I shot lean and mean. It's funny that you mentioned that phrase. There was no overshooting. There was no extra coverage. There was none of that. There was me absolutely, as I'm shooting, cutting in my mind what this film was going to be. So that allowed us to move faster on shoot days, you know, and because I've worked with people who've just, they want all this coverage. And then you're like, well, man, you know, you're going to spend a lot of time in the editing room, you know, trying to figure out what your scene is. Right. And so, I don't think, I mean, I probably would have spent more money on a sound guy to be able to show up, you know, that would have been nice.
Fair enough.
But other than that, I don't think it would have changed the result. I mean, you know, we were working with one creature. Sure, I could have probably made 10 more creatures if I had a lot more money, but we were able to achieve that by doing old school stuff, you know, for the third act, for instance, you know. So I always said, I don't know what I would do with all the money if I ever got it, because I'm so used to working on a shoestring budget and just trying to MacGyver stuff that it would be a strange place to be in. I'd be like, well, now we have all this excess money. And all I care about is the story and doing a good job. You know, I don't care about all the fluff they add because they have so much money.
I think one of my developers once said, you can do anything if you're wanting to spend money on it, but how much better is it? And I think this is the difference between, you know, you mentioned wearing those hats. You know, most really good engineers do not like to delegate because it feels unnecessary. Like, what do you mean I need to tell somebody else to do the thing? Like, it's in my head. I'm going to go do it myself because that's the fastest path to completion here in this case. Who made the creature suit? It looked really good.
And that is Jesse Jabor with Jabor SFX. He's a makeup effects artist. He's a good friend of mine. And early on, it was tricky because I'm like, I need a creature that's very menacing, but it needs to feel alive on the screen, because depending on the material we use, that could, you know, sorely screw everything up. So I pretty much was like, no latex. It has to be silicone. We have to find a way to make it silicone and keep it on the cheap as much as possible. And so we brainstormed some things, and after a few months, we finally got it down, and he painted it, and, you know, he did all the silicone work on it. From a technical standpoint, I wanted it to have this sweaty appeal to it, so that if we do low lighting stuff, you can see the creature just enough from any like lights that are hitting from any direction, essentially. So, but it was also kind of part of the lore, without exploring it too much, that this creature sweats in the cold. You know what I mean? So obviously, if wherever it's from, you know, we're not visiting that, but it's it's an interesting detail.
I now have an additional reason to go back and rewatch this film. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, we were joking at one point, after watching the movie, and we were kind of regrouping, like, all right, what are we going to ask? How is this conversation going to go? Like, one of us cracked the joke that it was the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon kind of influences. And I mean,
he grabs your lead character by the throat and then he leaves.
When I think about a character design, maybe I studied a little bit of biology in high school and college, that I think that evolution is always intentional, is always about, you can learn a lot about the environment a creature is from by analyzing what the creature is. So I'm looking at this monster and I'm thinking it's smooth skinned, which means less aerodynamic drag, which means it either has to be airborne, which this doesn't have wings or anything, which means it's got to be underwater. So it's dealing with fluid dynamics. But I thought aquatic. Whereas the idea, no, this is from a high heat environment. This is, so even we're like a low heat environment. So it's sweating, even though it's 35 degrees outside and everyone's running around in quilted flannel. That opens up some elements of, well, wait, what? Well, what also the creature's got to be a predator, right? It has claws, forward facing eyes and giant fangs. What the fuck is it hunting? It's kind of like the Predator in the movie Predator. Yeah. Wait a minute. This thing has laser cannons and heat vision. What the hell is it actually trying to kill most of the time?
Yeah. Everything, Lucas. It's trying to kill everything.
Well, the actual answer is Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it is what it is. I mean, when you were coming up with the plot and in your head, you thought scary monster, menacing, and you had some practical considerations, but what were you thinking about with the monster? Were you thinking about a particular animal? Were you just kind of like, what gives me icky feelings? Let's make that into our monster. Where were you going with that?
I mean, nothing's more terrible than something that doesn't have pupils for eyes. It's just completely empty black, evil, and big teeth, something that is physically imposing. Everything is sharp about it. Its claws, its feet, its obvious teeth, and its screech, So I think that's enough, to run in the opposite direction, So those were the things that I was looking for the most, and I wasn't interested in doing something that seemed like an insect or some kind of cheesy sci-fi look, I wanted to lean more into this hybrid of, it could be this demon creature from hell, or it could be from another dimension. So there's and if you notice, I don't want to get into that.
You're either going to spoil something or you're going to talk about something below its belt line, and we don't need to go there necessarily.
You forgot about its most terrifying characteristic, though. It's polite. It knocks before it comes in and tries to kill you.
Yeah. Pounds on the door, and there's no doorbell. So,
I mean, that's fair. I mean, if there were a doorbell, you get a little ding dong right as it's going.
Yeah.
It's the perfect opportunity to just internalize some dialogue in your head. Like, is the monster walking up going, all right, here we go again. Bang, bang, bang. What time is it? I'm here to kill you again, of course.
Well, if you notice, even the first interaction with the creature could kill him anytime it wants, but there's a reason why it hasn't. And it gets called back, of course. And it isn't until the very end that it's more life-threatening than you first meet it. There's, so that has a lot to do with what gets revealed and, who shows up, et cetera, et cetera. So
I'll say it again. Good storytelling, my friend. Good storytelling.
Thank you.
So, I mean, with all of that said, I mean, you've got and correct me if I'm wrong, please. This is your first full feature length, right? This is the first 100% start to finish yours. Because I know in your IMDb credits, you were a cinematographer for another film. You've done, as you said, a bunch of commercials before. But this is your first feature length movie, which is out now. You said the date was August 15th or 12th when it came out.
August 12th.
August 12th.
This past Tuesday. Yeah.
So this has been out week-ish. And by the time this episode gets dropped in a few days, it'll be, 2-ish weeks, give or take. All things being equal, you've got this out now. Do you have a sense of what your next project is going to be? Are you going to just take some time off and get back to commercial stuff? Or is it now officially Michael Yammine feature director?
I'm still in the TV commercial world, which is totally fine. It's what pays the bills. But I do have a few concepts in mind. I've had a few meetings this past week about what direction I want to go in. And I'm hoping very soon, if not, next spring, we're in production for it. I just got to pen it, essentially, and write it. I have the idea floating in my head. And I met actually with Tim, who plays Arthur, Tim O'Haran. I met with him again. And we had a good conversation about it. It was a pretty interesting idea. And I think it'd be something new that people will like.
Is it a horror? Please tell me if it's a horror.
It's actually it's I'm revisiting drawing those parallels between religion and sci-fi again, but on a more, it's got horror elements to it for sure, but it is very it's got a lot of good action in it. I'll say that much.
All right. Okay. But I'm not going to tell you that you have to let us in, but I am going to say if you get a screener and you think, I wonder what those wacky guys in St. Louis are doing, we're always happy. We're always happy to give it a watch.
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Yeah. Anybody. I mean, that's the whole thing about putting it out there. It's the most vulnerable thing you can do, and you hope that everyone loves it and you hope everyone hates it, because you got them to think about something. So when that happens, for sure, I'd be happy to send you guys a screener and check it out. And
excellent.
What is the hardest part really about this? Is more a question about creativity as a whole, but when you're writing a film like this or your next project, is it harder to put the stamp on it and say, okay, this is done, I'm ready to tell this story? Or is it more difficult to find the right people to help you tell that story? Whether that's your cast, your crew, your editor, or who's going to distribute the movie. I think today, 2025, it's a lot easier to just put things out yourself than it ever was 20 years in the past. But when you have a story like that, I mean, this one's deeply personal, I feel, and the next one may be as well. But is it harder to put the stamp on it and say, okay, now I'm ready to tell the story or is it more difficult to really convey it to the right people to help you tell that story?
I mean, when I wrote Reset and everybody read it, they all said they loved it, but I knew it was confusing on paper for them, and whether they admitted it or not, right? And there's a writer friend of mine who I shared it with, and I don't think he got it on paper, but then he came to a local premiere and watched it, and then he's like, I get it now. I see it, because I couldn't see it on the paper what you're trying to do, but when I watched the film, it was like a completely different thing for me. So, you have to trust your instincts when you feel like the film is ready to go into production. You might not always have the perfect people available to you. The beautiful thing about Reset was I did have those people available to me, and I had written their roles respectively. Like Arthur, I knew Tim was going to play. Lucas, I knew Adam was going to play. The only people I hadn't cast was who Eden was going to be, the little girl who actually is my little cousin, and she's never acted before. So I got lucky that she was able to do what she did.
She did a great job, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, she very much blew us out of the water because, dealing with child actors today, it's challenging. I mean, you've got rules as far as how many hours they can be on set, what time, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it was a matter of convenience. And luckily for me, she lived at the house we were shooting at. So it worked out even better logistically. And her features matched a certain somebody that actually worked out in the film for the overall grand scheme of things. So, and then when I met Caitlin Westfall, who plays Ruth, there was something innocent about her and childlike, if the way she talks and her facial expressions and her smile and all that. And I was like, man, this is Ruth. This is the character Ruth. And Reese Ravencraft, who did a phenomenal job as well, plays Evie. She's from Texas, actually. We flew her in to be in the film. And I've seen her in other indie films and such. And I was like, man, she's such a strong actress. I would love for her to be a part of this. In fact, she read for the part of Ruth first. And then when I met Caitlin, I was like, I'm so sorry, but I gotta change trajectory here. You're you're gonna be Evie and she's Ruth. And honestly, I really appreciated how professional Reese was about that because you know you, that's a significant cut in screen time. And when she met Caitlin for the first time when she came into town after we had left having a dinner with the cast, she looked at me and she says, "That was the right choice. She is definitely Ruth." So I really appreciated that, and I just appreciate her as a performer overall because she does such a great job. You believe everything she's saying, and she pours her heart into it. You know, so um, as far as knowing if your film is ready to go, I think on the next one it's going to be challenging because I didn't have the actors in mind first. You know, so but all you can do is just the best thing to do is just get your story done. If you have your story, you know, one step at a time, find who you need, and um, it should be smooth sailing after that because we went through a lot of challenges with reset based on weather changes and there were things happening in my uncle's property where he was like residing the house and residing the barn and putting a pond. I mean, there was crazy things happening there where I had to be very cognizant of what I shot to make sure I don't show any inconsistencies. So,
That sounds like an editor's nightmare.
oh, it would have been if it was somebody else, I guess, but it was me. And luckily, when I was shooting, I was very cognizant of what angles I was going for to conceal any changes that were happening, you know, throughout the year we shot. So,
A year. You were in that field for a year.
yeah, it was on and off. We started shooting in November of 2022, and we had that stretch of beautiful weather before the cold harshness came in. And once that came in, we were shooting in the barn, freezing our butts off for months, and then there was about 3 or 4 months before our creature was finished. And then once the creature was finished, we had to come back and shoot again, sparingly, because when we were shooting, I believe we were shooting some of it in the summertime, even. I mean, nighttime wasn't until about 10 p.m. Like you're talking pitch black nighttime.
Right.
So to be consistent, we had to wait till then. And then you had like a hard out at like 1:30 in the morning or something. So you had a few hours to play with to do all these elaborate like stunt stuff or, you know, shooting blanks or, you know, anything that has to do with the creature. So there was a lot of there was a lot of challenges for sure. So in trying to keep in mind everything because you know I don't have a script supervisor. I don't have anybody who's you know what I'm saying. I'm
Well, you did have a script supervisor. It was you.
yeah, it was me. I mean,
have you
I
ever
didn't even
met
put
this
that in the
man
credits.
named Michael Yammine? He was the script supervisor.
So
Yeah, it's
you were talking about the local premieres that I'm assuming were more on your side of the country, more East Coast.
yeah.
And so I'm guessing you had an opportunity to be present at one of those, right? Like you were able to sit down and see the movie literally on the big screen.
Oh, both times. And we had a Q&A session afterwards. And I mean, they were both great experiences. There was probably about 200 people each night, which was amazing. And, you know, it wasn't like it was all friends and family. It was a lot of people from the community who heard about it. And and it was such a great experience. It was nice to just see how people were reacting to it.
So what I was thinking, the question I was thinking about is, you're in the theater, you've sat through the 70, 80-ish minutes of the runtime, credits roll, lights come up. Are you going, oh God, did they like it? Oh God, did they like it? Or were you going, yes, we nailed it? Like which was the bigger emotion, do you think? Was it more the nervousness of a creator waiting for their work to be received? Or was it, no, I set out to accomplish what I accomplished. I have no regrets about this.
The first night, the applause was loud, right? And I was like, okay, that means great, right? And then you have the Q&A after, and people totally got it. And I had so many people come up to me and just say, I have no words. It was fantastic, or something along those lines, which is an amazing feeling, And or then there were some people who came up to me and I tried to explain their interpretation, and they were kind of connecting it to their own stuff, like their own trauma and whatnot. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then the second night, everyone was quiet after the credits were over. I was like, huh, that's interesting. But I think it was because everybody was so shocked, because the Q&A session was great. Like, the response was amazing. So yeah, obviously at the end, you're like, wow, not even an applause. Everybody's just kind of quiet. And I didn't realize everybody was marinating for a minute. And I thought that was a beautiful thing. So, yeah, I don't know. When I'm watching it, when people are laughing at the right moment or people are gasping at the right moment, it's like you're doing something right, because I've one of the things that Christopher Nolan said that really resonated with me was, he was asked, how do you feel about people who don't understand your films? He says, don't try to understand it, just feel it. And I was like, that is a thread I can pull on that makes sense to me, because there are films that, even if I didn't understand right away, movies like The Fountain or Pie or something, you still felt something after you watched it, and those are like films you have to revisit over and over again. So if I made people feel something when they were watching the film, and let's say they didn't get it, that was enough for me. I did what I was supposed to do.
I'm interested in this thing. We were talking kind of at the beginning of this interview about, grief and trauma and those deeply, sometimes very dark, but very human experiences. And how, you were saying that the audience was kind of connecting it to their own. And I suspect anyone who's ever had even 5 minutes of grief can look at that and go, oh, yeah, got it.
Yeah.
One of the things that's so interesting to me, I read in a book on grief, actually. I wish I could remember the title now. I could remember it 3 weeks ago, and 3 weeks from now, I'll certainly remember the title of this book. But the author made this point about grief being a very irrational emotion. If someone gives you a nice birthday gift, you say, oh man, that's great. Thank you. And you feel grateful and you're happy. And now you've got this cool new thing that you're proud of. But grief does not operate like that. Grief operates on its own terms. You think, I'm over this issue. I'm fine. And then 6 weeks later, you are now in tears because a memory hits you the hard, wrong way or whatever. One of the things about this movie is that it has a dream logic, and it has kind of a, wait, what's going on again? There's a moment that there's a couple of minutes that you go, wait, holy fuck. Whoa. Hold on. What happened? What is this exactly? Do you find that connection between grief, like grief being so irrational, was that kind of how you were playing without saying certain things don't need to be spoon fed to the audience? If you understand grief, you'll understand that this part is totally fair. This is a totally reasonable thing to happen.
Yeah. I mean, grief is so chaotic, because all it takes is a dream or a memory or a sound. It takes is those little things to trigger it, and you're back in the past again, and you can't see what's right in front of you anymore. You're not living in the present. You don't know how to move forward, and all you keep doing is taking the hand of the past, and you don't want to let it go. And it keeps just pulling you down, pulling you down, pulling you down. And so when it came to this, like, hit the ground running approach to the film, it is very much an experience that everyone is sort of faced with their own grief. and I can't speak for everyone because for some people it's a slow burn, and for other people it's like being violently attacked, and so that was kind of the approach with that, is that some of those dreams and such were real to the character, whereas some were more symbolic and a message on how to like get out of your own way, so it was very much intentional for sure to go in that direction.
And do you apply the same kind of Nolan view to that grief? I think that's one of the hardest things when grief is attacking you, which is the way I like to look at it. It's hard to say, it's easy to say, it's hard to do sometimes to just, let it go. Do you think that view of filmmaking also applies to those negative feelings? Like, don't try to understand it. Just accept that it is, and you got to go to the next thing. I know, Lucas, you've said it a few times. Don't try to understand why the negative is occurring. How you react to the negative is the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that happens in your life that you can't explain. And how many people just say it is what it is? I don't know. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why this happened today. I don't know why this person said this. I don't know why this person disappeared on me or whatever. There's so much. That's part of the whole unknown aspect of everything, is like there's just some things you can't explain and you're going through it. And then once you get out of it, all you can do is say, this is what I went through. Do you buy it or not? But I'm still here, so there is some of that in this film, but I also didn't want it to be this just one big throwaway concept where it's like zero answers whatsoever. And it's like, no, I didn't want that. I wanted to show that this person realizes he's been selfish. He's been hanging on to his grief, and the people around him have been suffering, and he couldn't see what's right in front of him. So he missed all the moments that could have been. And, and he realizes that his choices were leading to essentially was the end of the world, and it could just be his world. You know what I mean? So
this idea of a weirdly personal apocalypse, that the end of the world, even if it's actually happening, is happening to everybody in the world, or it's the end of your world, not the end of the world.
Exactly. And honestly, as far as you saying, leaving some things open, it's like, if I had him wake up in a hospital bed, how cheap would that feel to you?
Oh, this would have started with, Michael, fuck you.
Exactly. Like, it would be a silly way to do it, just so that the audience can have a definitive answer. And it's, in that sense of the grand scheme of things, but it's like, that's not any way to tell a story. I mean, hell, I don't even like if there's aliens in a story and somebody says the word aliens. It just ruins it. Just like, don't say it. Just show it. And I think everybody knows what we're talking about here, but it sounds silly when you actually use the word, so that's why the word was never visited in the film. They were just these beings. So
as a way to kind of round out our conversation, so much of this conversation has been about the ugliness of trauma and how there's a lot of mystery in the world, and that mystery is not always comfortable. Sometimes that mystery is real uncomfortable, and sometimes that mystery is a giant fish man beating you to death with his claws. But
and then he leaves.
And then he leaves without even so much as offering you some aspirin.
Hey, I thought you were going to kill me over here. Not today, buddy. Not today.
There's a couple of scenes where I thought, I know that our protagonist has a shotgun in the car and all of that. Man, I hope he's got some Advil or something, because God, he's got to be hurting today. I got to know, as kind of just a final thought, and I'm not a guy who, anyone who knows me personally, who has interacted with me online, knows that I'm not a sunshine and rainbows kind of guy necessarily, but I've got to know, what was your favorite moment on set? What was was there ever a moment you always hear stories of people who have to get covered in gore going, oh God, like they get through the scene, but then go, oh God, give me a towel. Was there like anything that just stuck out to you as just a good, like a funny moment, or where the crew finally got to laugh and get it out of their system? Like what's the fun part of filming a story about trauma, loss, and violence? Well, that's an insane question.
Well
Honestly,
done, sir.
Well, honestly, one of the funniest things that happened was Tyler Mack, who was one of the creature performers. He was on the truck and he had to hit his mark when he jumps off the truck when he gets shot. And Josh, who was part of the crew, he was supposed to tell him, he's supposed to yell Mark so that he'll jump onto his mark. And he did it too late. And he jumped off and landed on his back and basically knocked the wind out of him. But he was in a silicone.
A moving truck, I'm assuming. So
Yes.
oh God.
So the shot looked great, but we were all laughing because, I mean, he missed the mark by like, I don't know, 10 feet or something. It was
Oh God.
Oh,
So that was pretty funny. I mean,
I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass. We call this Alien Truck.
but he was so excited to do it again. That's what I loved about it. He was like, "Oh yeah, I love it. Let's do it again."
I
like,
was going to say, are you saying that he was excited and happy to do it again, or was he actually excited and happy to do it again?
He was. Let me tell you, man. These creature performances. The first one was actually my cousin. He's a Marine right now. He's in the military currently, and before he got stationed, he played the creature for a short amount of time. And let me tell you, you're not comfortable in that thing. When it is cold, it is freezing. When it is hot, we were dumping their hands out or their feet, the creature's feet, from how much sweat. I mean, at one point, when they're walking all sweaty, you just hear, like it was bad, So it was so uncomfortable for them that for him to be excited to get back up on the truck or do anything, I was blown away because I'm like, you are not comfortable. You are not having a good time. And a lot of times he's just standing around waiting, so it was so challenging, but I really appreciated the hard work and the sacrifices both of them made, because there was a time on set when we were doing a scene and I was giving direction to my cousin who was in the creature suit. It was freezing out, mind you. And he wasn't there mentally. He was gone. So he wasn't listening to me, right? He was trying to go somewhere warm in his head, essentially. So I remember at one point, being that he's my cousin, I kind of roasted him a little bit about it because I was frustrated. But then I realized how cold he was, because once he walked up to me, he was shaking. And I was like, okay, we got to take a 10. Let's go inside. Let's warm him up. And I kept apologizing to him after we wrapped at night. Because I was like, man, I had no idea you were that cold. Like you were freezing to death in there. He's like, yeah, I couldn't take any direction. I was a robot essentially. And I was like, wow, I really appreciate you doing that for me. So, and then there were moments where you just get chills. That scene with Reese and Adam before he leaves the house in the wintry snow, her exchange with him, I mean, she gave the whole cast and crew like goosebumps with her performance.
I believe it.
It was a very, very emotionally effective and convincing scene. Like she looked like without blowing anything in the script at all, she looked like she was in agony. She looked like she was absolutely tortured by the character arc that she is forced to follow.
Mm-hmm. And one of the great things she did was she ad-libbed that final line there. She asked me, "Can I try something?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I had not written that line in the script.
Really?
And she poured her heart out in that line where she said, "Doesn't matter how many of those things you kill, it's not going to bring her back." And that obviously made the trailer.
Yeah.
And I literally, I mean, I have chills right now talking about it because I still remember the moment. And when she was done, I was like, that was beautiful. Like, I can't thank you enough for at least asking me to try something.
That's an incredible, like, to access that space emotionally. She had to have been so open in that moment. I mean, and
Yeah.
comfortable but vulnerable at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, before we started the scene, she said, "Can I have a few minutes?" And I said, "Absolutely. Go take all the time you need." And she went and she kind of disappeared into a corner and she went to wherever she needed to go and grabbed whatever tools she needed from her performance box and then came back and just like nailed it every single time. And like I said, on that third try, that's when she wanted to try something. And that's exactly what's in the trailer and in the film because it was just so profound. I was like, oh man, that's so great. Such a good choice, you know.
Is there a very significant moment that was ruined by the director, cameraman, and or sound guy?
Oh, that's a good.
Like,
that's a
did
good
you have a
question.
10 out of 10 moment where you're like, shit, I fucked that up?
Honestly, no, because I was by myself. I had to be very cognizant of like any emotional scenes where I didn't want to wear out the actors. So anything that required the cool thing about Adam was like he had this ability to get a tear out of his one eye,
Ooh.
like on action, right? He could just do it. There was no like we didn't bring in mint or like, you know, whatever the tricks are, like he would actually do it.
Like Hulk Hogan
And
with the
so
vapor rub, like, let me get it in there.
there was none of that. I mean, the intro part of the film when he's laying there and he's just emotionally welling up, listening to his recording. Um, I would only do like a couple takes, and I would say that's it. Like I could have pushed for more. I could have tried something else. I was like, I don't want to wear these guys out emotionally. That's not going to be good, you know. So I can't say there was a fumble on my end because I was very cognizant of like I can't screw this up because you don't want to get them past the point where they just can't do it anymore. They're exhausted because getting emotional like that just wears you out, and I couldn't do that
Absolutely.
to them.
I mean, I think there's no such thing as a good way to end an interview, especially about a project that is so deeply personal and so in a weird way transpersonal. That is so much about just being a person and being a human being living with a head full of ghosts and demons, but sometimes angels, as it were.
Mm.
Obviously, the thing that we have to say here is, well, you guys need to go see this movie. You need to go do that. I mean, like, we're fans of the film. This has been a really cool conversation. And the thing I want to ask is if you could pass like what, like, you know, you're a guy who's got a commercial background and you're finally living out your dream of doing feature films. You clearly really care about cinema, about the movies. Is there a single like final word of advice you would give to anyone who's either an actor, a creator, or even someone who just likes working with sound? What would be the one thing you would say to help them get to a place where they're actually working on a production?
Don't give up and draw from experience. Don't try to take Christopher Nolan's voice. Don't try to take Quentin Tarantino's voice. Those are their voices. They're drawing from their own experiences. And if you want to stand out, you have to draw from your own so that it cuts through all of the mainstream or mundane type stuff and people can actually notice you and hear your voice. I think a lot of filmmakers in the indie space they just don't get it sometimes. Like you can see it sometimes, whether it's in the trailer or it's in the story, and you're like, oh, you had a cool concept here, but I don't think you quite got it because it doesn't feel like your film has a soul. And I think it's because there isn't something personal in there. You know, it's just the hubris of saying I'm a filmmaker or something like that. And that's not to throw shade on any filmmaker. It's just that sometimes people see it the wrong way. And I think if you take a chance and really carve out something from your life and make it personal, you're going to find that way more gratifying when you connect with people rather than just telling a point A, B, and C story. Um, because you liked some other film of some kind, you know. So don't give up, and you have to be vulnerable. You have to be absolutely vulnerable. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, as far as telling a story, if you're not going to share a piece of yourself, you know, if the only thing I had to contribute to this film was my technical abilities, that'd be a pretty boring approach to the whole thing. Nobody will. All anybody would learn from me is that maybe I can shoot a good shot, or you know, edit a film or something. That's pointless. So
This is not a business card of my technical ability. This is an actual story. And, you know,
yes,
I like what you're saying. It sounds like, to me, what I'm getting from it is it's still art, no matter how much the industry wants to make it into a business. Don't forget that.
yeah. I mean, when I made this film, it wasn't about like, okay, if we do this, we're gonna make this kind of money, or if we do that, it's gonna be. It was just like, let's just tell a great story. Let's make it look great, and let's hopefully touch a few people with it, or at least find our audience. And then whatever came after, when it did, from a business standpoint, it was that much more beautiful. It was like, oh, hey, I honestly was not expecting that, but thank you so much. Let's do it. Whatever the deal is, or however it gets out there. So, if you go, I mean, you have to treat it like a business, but the art comes first of it as far as that goes, because you don't want to. You don't want to make a film and expect it to sell and not have a little bit of business background when it comes to that, because then you'll fail pretty miserable on that front, because a lot of artists who don't have a background in business at all, they find themselves in a weird place where like, why isn't anybody buying my art? And it's like, well, you forgot about one important aspect of it. But if you want to be a filmmaker, it's just like, just tell a story that means something to you, write something that you want to watch and get it out there. And if it gets out there, hopefully you'll make some money. That'd be amazing.
I am a physical media junkie. Is there a Blu-ray plan for this film?
I have delivered art for physical media. I don't know when that's going to roll out, if it is, or how that's working. I hear so many rumors about physical media getting pulled off shelves, and that kind of breaks my heart because I'm such a big fan of that. And so I don't have a definitive answer when it comes to that, but
I'll be watching.
So
guaranteed.
yeah.
So even if there isn't a physical media release, where can people right now go and see 2025 Michael Yammine's Reset?
Right now it's streaming on Amazon Prime, Fandango at Home, Spectrum on Demand, Apple TV, and I believe Xbox right now.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap. And I'll say, guys, go watch this movie. Why the hell have you been listening to this podcast? Pause this show and go watch 2025's Michael Yammine. And Michael, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been an absolutely fun conversation. And thank you so much for sharing so much clearly personal, meaningful stuff. I mean, honestly, this is the exact sort of interview I live for. This is awesome.
No, thank you so much for having me. You guys are great. I love the energy, and I love talking shop. So it's even more gratifying when you find some film junkies like yourself.
Indeed.
So
Appreciate that, man. And I'm going to ask a PS question here because I like to throw wrenches when necessary. We don't have to stop talking. We're going to wrap the recording here in a second.
Sure.
But I like to end off anytime we have a conversation, especially when it's about a film like this that's so damn serious. I think we've all had that bad day. So I like to ask everybody who loves film, whether it's, if you love film, if you love music, if you love games, whatever you like, everybody has something that they've gone to or they go to when they have one of those bad days. So my question to you, Michael, and then I'm going to throw it to you, Lucas. Michael, when you have one of those bad days, what movie are you watching? What show are you watching? What are you putting on the screen for you that you might bring to a Friday night hangout with me and Lucas? Like, guys, it was one of those days. This is what we're watching tonight.
That's such a mixed bag too. It depends. I mean, if it's a really bad day and I just want to feel, I guess, dark and morbid, I'll probably go revisit like Peaky Blinders and do like a marathon of that. Or I'll, and if I want to feel sort of out of this world, I guess I'll go watch Interstellar. That movie is probably the only movie that can make me choke up and make me just remind me how insignificant we all are in the vastness of it all, and that day is just, you know, it's nothing but a whisper in your ear, essentially. So yeah, it varies. I mean, or I might revisit, or if I got to get a little dysfunctional, I might watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia. If I gotta
There
cheer
it
up,
is.
you know, it's that's a given.
You're right, though. It's a mixed bag. I mean, if you ask me right now, like today's going to be a bad day, I'm like, well, tomorrow we're watching Robin Hood Men in Tights, gentlemen, because
Oh, yeah,
Mel Brooks does
that's-
not need an excuse. Lucas, what about you, man?
If I'm needing to get way out of my own head, like, you know, you have a day where you're kind of stuck in your own head, I'll put on Kubrick, right? I'll go with something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like kind of keeping in the theme of the extra spooky and the extra dimensional. A movie like 2001 is always so good for breaking up my headspace. I remember watching that movie for the first time in my late teens and watching some of the space sequences and thinking, how the hell did they do this? Like, I know it's a movie. I know it was done on a soundstage. I know it was done with miniatures and just good special effects. But there's so much in that movie that even now I'm not quite sure how they did it. Like, there's like the final sequence, you know, the most trippy part of the film. There's still whole parts like, how the fuck do you light a room that way to make it look like that? It's utterly inhuman. But if I'm needing a good chuckle, I'll go back to Mel Brooks also. But if I'm going Mel Brooks, I'm going like History of the World Part 1, or I'm gonna go with I gotta say this, and this is weird because I'm not a Star Wars guy, but I'll go with Spaceballs because it is just eminently quotable, and there's so many weird little one-liners through it that have no bearing on the plot. They're just completely out of the blue one-liners that you just go, why the fuck is he talking about Franz Kafka all of a sudden? What is this? So no, I think there is a value in that. And you know, we're from St. Louis, so I'm always always in the mood for a Vincent Price movie. Vincent Price, if you like your horror to be both spooky but very silly, I think Vincent Price also always cuts the mustard. He's always good for a laugh.
Dr. Phibes rides again. It's one of the silliest horror movies I've ever seen.
Amen.
Yeah, if you want to cheer up, it's, you know, another thing for me is like Edgar Wright. I love Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. You know, those are just that dry humor always gets to me. Or if you want to go back further and do something like The Naked Gun, I mean, Leslie Nielsen is a national treasure in my book. I don't know how he does it, but
you know, I don't know how he had an entire career before he figured out he was funny.
Talking about like space movies, you know, Forbidden Planet was, I think, his first big break, and he was seen as a leading, like, dashing, handsome young star. And like, don't get me wrong, he absolutely kills that movie. He's so good from start to finish. But man, it's so weird to think of him as Detective Frank Drebin, knowing that he was also the savior of a planet in outer space. It's so. I don't know. You want to talk about weird careers? I think his was kind of top of the charts there.
Yeah, something perfect happened with him. That just I don't. Every time I see one of those movies, I'm like, man, I don't think you even knew you had this in you. Like, it's just, it's amazing. Like, I wish he was still around. I can't imagine what he'd be doing right now. You know, another sci-fi film. Yeah.
Boo. Oh, low blow.
Another sci-fi film that I saw that felt like real sci-fi for once was No One Will Save You. I think it was, or No One Can Save You. Or maybe it's No One Will Save You on Hulu. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's an original.
No, but now I'm going to be watching that tonight.
That movie has like one line of dialogue, but the whole film, I promise you won't even guess what's going to happen. And that's what really impressed me about it. And it had such an indie filmmaking feel to it, even though it was a Hulu original. So I think you guys would find that very enjoyable.
That will go on the list, actually. Okay. Yeah. See, the name of the movie, No One Will Save You. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap it here for the night. Ladies and gentlemen, Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll talk to you all again very soon.
That's right, lad, for you.